Call this meeting to order pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. On June 16th of 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st of 2023 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order. The December 19th Select Board meeting today will be conducted by a remote participation by the board, and I am going to grant Westwood Media Center the permission to record the meeting and ask, is there anyone else wishing to record? Seeing none based on the attendee list, I'm going to jump right into the chair's update. So we start with our holiday cardboard only dumpster at Carby Street. So we'll try to get everybody in the recycling spirit. DPW will once again offer a dumpster at Carby Street, 50 Carby Street, for Westwood residents to drop off excess cardboard. You can dispose of cardboard only, no trash, wrapping paper, twist ties, peanuts, styrofoam, any of that will be accepted, as this will contaminate the dumpster. The cardboard only dumpster will be open on the following dates and times: December 27th, 28th, 29th, and the 30th from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and January 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th also from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And the dumpster will be closed on December 26th and on January 2nd. Staying with the holiday spirit, Christmas tree pickup will go January 3rd through January 13th. DPW will be picking up Christmas trees in that window from January 3rd to the 13th. And please place your Christmas tree curbside by 7 a.m. on your regularly scheduled collection days. All trees must be free of plastic bags, stands, ornaments, hooks, tinsel, and other materials in order to be acceptable for collection. And finally, the fireworks that will be on New Year's Eve will start at 7 p.m. at Westwood High School and proudly sponsored by Roach Brothers. We thank them very much for their support. We'd also like to thank the Recreation Department staff, Westwood Fire Department, Westwood Police, and the DPW for all their time and effort in putting this event together for all the residents of Westwood. Moving now to scheduled action, we have the Pan Mass Challenge Kids Ride scheduled for May 31st, 2023. And I believe that we have Nancy James should be in attendance. Is that true? Do we have Nancy?
I am. I'm here. Thank you.
Excellent. Nancy, tell us a little bit about the ride and what you're requesting.
Well, we are back again in person, had our 13th annual ride in June. I know I was before the board a few times and had to cancel due to COVID. So we were thrilled to be back in person back in June. It was a great event with 164 riders. So we are looking to host the event again on Sunday, May 21st. And we'll be consistent with the prior courses of a 1 mile loop, a 5 mile, and a 10 mile loop. So we very much appreciate the town's support. Couldn't have asked for more support from the police department, fire department, and DPW. So we anticipate a little over 175 riders, and basically everything will remain the same.
Excellent.
From a course standpoint.
Well, this is a great event to have back for its 14th annual, and want to ask my colleagues, does anybody have any questions?
No.
Chris, I imagine as this is fairly consistent year to year, there's no concern from Chief or on the police force side?
Correct.
All right. So let's move to a motion.
I move the select board approve the 14th annual Pan Mass Challenge Kids Ride to be held on Sunday, May 21st, 2023, pending approval of the school department and obtaining the appropriate permits from the town administrator's office, the Board of Health, and the building department.
And I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Nancy, thank you, and we hope you have great weather and wish you much success for the ride.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next up, we have the good fortune to accept a MIAA grant of $9,300.89 for facilities related safety equipment that was recently awarded to the town and the facilities department. Chris, is Jimmy here with us?
He
Yeah,
is.
I just brought him in.
Welcome, Jimmy. Can you
Good
hear us?
evening.
All right. So do you want to take us through a little background on this?
Yeah, so basically, MIAA has a program every year where they support local towns with some safety equipment. It's a $10,000 grant that we can apply for. And we were fortunate to receive almost everything we requested this year, so almost $10,000 worth of safety equipment for the town this year.
Well, this is certainly one of the easiest parts of this job, is to be able to accept awards or grants when you guys see the opportunity to apply for them. And we really thank you for, pursuing those. And so if there are no questions from my colleagues, I would
I have
entertain
just
a
a
motion.
quick question. I have just a quick question, Jimmy. This is great. Thank you. I was hoping you could explain a little about the thermography cameras. What do we use those for?
The thermal imaging camera. So that's what we use. We can use that
Can
to
you hear me?
assess a building. To see if there's any cold spots. If we have complaints of an issue in the building, it gives us a view of the building to check on insulation. Any heat loss in the buildings. It enables us to locate the areas that's happening and address the issues.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions, Michael?
no questions. I read this very, thanks for your help, Jimmy, in getting this for the town. We're always willing to accept free money. So with that, I would move that the select board accept the FY23 MIAA grant of $9,389.10 for facilities related safety equipment as awarded to the town and the facilities department.
I second that.
All right, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Jimmy, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Keep up the great
Thank you,
work.
Jimmy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
All right, next up, we have another grant. So this one is for the fiscal year 2023 Municipal ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. And it's a grant up to $100,000 by the Massachusetts Office on Disability. And I believe we have Danielle Sutton here to talk us through this one.
Sure. Thanks for having us. I'm here with the co-chairs of the Westwood Commission on Disability, Rania Kelly and Ann Berry Goodfellow. And this opportunity was, the town was made aware of the opportunity by Rania Kelly, who brought it to our attention and helped us in the initial stages of working through the application, and then was a support throughout, and contributed much of the content with her long history with the Commission on Disability. It really was a team effort. We had great support from Marianne LeBlanc. We had additional support from everybody's on this video. I'm looking around from Nora Loughnane, contributed much of the history from the Architectural Access Board. It was an application that had a lot of history, and we had to go through, the town's relationship with the Architectural Access Board, with the Massachusetts Office on Disability, and fill in all of the necessary parts of the application. And Tish was great in getting all of the documentation that we needed, getting all of the signatures. So really a great team effort that made for a successful application. And we're just really grateful for the opportunity and grateful for the involvement of the Commission on Disability. And we're looking forward to putting it to good use.
Well, sounds like a great team effort. And also thank you, Rania, for bringing that to everyone's attention. So are there any questions from either of my colleagues? Marianne, I know you were sort of involved. So any questions from either of you?
I have no questions, but I really want to thank Rania and Ann for their leadership as co-chairs on the Commission on Disability. Rania, you found this grant. And this never would have happened without you. And Danielle, you got this over the finish line in a short period of time. And it was just an incredible piece of work. So thank you. And if I could, Rob, I would love to just hear briefly, if we could, just from perhaps Rania and Ann, just very briefly, if we could. One of you.
Certainly.
Anne, I feel like you should say something.
You're on mute, Ann. Go down.
There we go. I love the tech challenges. I just want to comment, Mary Ann, and to the rest of the select board, that I think this effort represents what so many of the efforts around disability inclusion have represented in our community, that people in their various official capacities, whether it's on a volunteer board or the select board or other town offices, really have always stepped up and have done taken steps to really include individuals with disability and their challenges in town planning, and in really extending the welcome that our community extends to all of its members, to members of its community with disabilities. And this is just, a great representation of how that works with, as you mentioned, all the different individuals who participated in it, really to make our community a more welcoming place. So the kudos go all around to so many people in our community, and we appreciate that.
With that, any other questions? Thank you, Ann, very much, and Rania.
And I'm sure this is just the first step, is that we continue to move forward in Westwood. Thank you very much. Accept the FY23 Municipal Americans with Disability Act grant up to $100,000 as awarded to the town of Westwood by the Massachusetts Office on Disability.
I'm very excited to second that.
All right, and roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings. Roll call vote. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you. Congratulations to all.
Great job,
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, next up, we have members of our Charter Review Committee here to make a priority recommendation regarding the 2023 annual town meeting warrant, and regarding the positions of treasurer and tax collector. So with that, I don't know who is going to take the lead from the commission or the committee. So
hi, Rob, it's Peter Cahill, and I think I drew the short straw.
welcome to Peter and to all your colleagues from the board. I see that there's several that are on here. So why don't you go ahead and take us through, I believe you have a little bit of a presentation, yes?
I do, and I understand, Tish, will you be able to run through that? Oh, great. Oh, thank you very much. And yes, I see also that many members of our committee are also on. I'm the co-chair of this. Paul Fitzgerald's co-chair. Nancy's on it. Nancy Hyde, Dottie Powers, Chris Coleman. I don't know if John Knocknane is on.
Yes.
So yeah, so thank you. So I'll walk us through this, but of course I just would like to invite any of the committee members to, of course, chime in as well during this or after. But I will try to be brief running through all this. So what are we doing, or why are we here today? So from the top, we do have this priority recommendation that we want to bring before you. The ask is that what we're going to ask at the end is that the select board consider putting a warrant article on this cycle that reflects this priority recommendation. And what we're specifically recommending is that the town change the elected positions of treasurer and tax collector to be appointed positions. That is the specific request and recommendation that we're making. Tish, if you want to go to the next one. Yeah. Okay, so as you know, you appointed and created this board, this committee last spring, in March of 2022. Since we were gathered, we've had 13 public meetings. We've had 18 public officials come, including many of the folks on the call and the Zoom call today. During each meeting, there's been a public portion where anybody from the public has been invited and welcome to share input on this topic. We did have a specific meeting designed to try to solicit that input. The committee created in June of 2022 a survey that we sent to nearly all elected and appointed town boards and committees, seeking opinions and thoughts, suggestions on the town's charter. So in addition to just saying, having these meetings and welcoming for input, we did actively try to seek this input. And we've listed, again, many of the key stakeholders throughout town that were kind enough to come and share their thoughts with us. Tish, you can go to the next one. So from the beginning, it was immediately and overwhelmingly, the committee was urged to take a look at the treasurer and tax collector positions. Again, they're currently elected, but we've been urged to examine and consider whether those should be appointed by the town. We want to emphasize that this is not about any of the current members serving these roles or any of the previous members that have served in these roles. In fact, we recognize that Westwood has benefited immensely from having particularly well qualified treasurer and tax collectors serving in these roles. So we've been very, very lucky. But what is very clear is that we are really relying on luck to have folks that have the professional expertise in municipal finance be willing to run for election and win election to that office. And we also realize that the consequences of not having a professional in those roles, if that were to be the case, would be a real disastrous scenario for the town. Local municipal finance laws have evolved and are very, very complex. We now have to deal with what rating agencies consider. Think of the town financial management. There's bonding obligations that go along with being the town treasurer. And so when these roles were established many, many decades ago, they may have been more clerical and ministerial at that time. It is no longer the case. These roles require folks with real skill and expertise in those areas. Again, what we're recommending and why we're here before you tonight is hoping that the select board would consider putting this issue in the warrant article process for this year's town meeting cycle. Tish, if you could go to the next one. Oh yeah, you had that. Okay, so just to give an image of what we're dealing with, this is a breakdown of what do other cities and towns do, and Westwood is in the small red slice of the pie, at less than 13% of towns that have currently elected treasurer and tax collector. That is dynamic. It's going to be a shrinking piece as the years go by. That red slice will be smaller and smaller. One of the set of folks that came before us that we invited were from the Division of Local Services, and they are housed underneath the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. Is their mission to try to educate towns and emphasize the importance that skilled financial experts are in these roles, and they are advocating that these positions be within the appointed chart of town government and not left to chance for being elected. So data to create these charts is used from data supplied by them. Tish, you can go to the next one. Okay, so this is the why now. Why now? Well, the time is right at this point in time today here as we sit. It is the case that the most recently elected town treasurer voluntarily resigned in October, and this board has appointed an interim treasurer, and his role I think as you've currently appointed it, would be into 2024. The next treasurer, the next town collector would be up for election in 2023. If this recommendation is accepted and this goes through the warrant process, and if town meeting approves of this change, it would go to the Massachusetts legislature, and we are early enough, and it could be in the cycle that this change would become effective for us in 2023. So we are early enough to in 2024, sorry. So we are early enough in the process to make this change in time so that there's not another treasurer elected that we'd have to transition out. Yeah, thank you. I'll just say the last bullet, sorry, just to say the last bullet. We are still in process. We have we do have continued deliberations on other recommendations that we expect to have, and we would expect to do a fulsome set of recommendations. We just haven't had the time to fully go through and consider each of those items at this point. And we will expect to do that within the next year and be before you again on a broad set of recommendations. But this issue just popped up and has been such an important topic. And again, the consensus is to bring it before you today.
And well, Peter, thank you. And thank you to all. This is an important exercise that we go through once every 10 years. And I believe we're probably a couple of years off cycle because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
So, going back to Tish, if you could, to the slide with the pie, are we later in the game because this started to gain momentum after our last charter review?
Yes, it has been shifting over the decades. I would say we could probably generate one from 2010 to show the difference, but I think it would probably be 2 times the size. But we could produce that information, I think.
And if I can add to it, if I can add, Rob, the prior charter commissions have looked at what we're bringing to you tonight back 12 years ago, and then also in the 80s. And we were so well served by the people in those positions that it was felt that that wasn't the right time. And now we have more momentum and changes statewide, and a transition, as Peter was pointing out, that really made this kind of an ideal timing for the town and an opportunity we don't think we should pass on.
And importantly, I believe that you had the folks come before you that had served in those roles, and they also recommended that this move be made, correct?
In the case of the treasurer, yes.
Yep. Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chairperson, both Peter and I were on the last Charter Commission, and we did look at this question. At that time is when we created the Municipal Finance Department and Director. And it was felt that we didn't need to make this change at that time. And I know the Charter Commissions going back to the 80s have looked at this question. But Westwood is in sound financial position. And one of the reasons it is so is because we have created and pursued sound fiscal policies. And we feel that making sure that our treasurer and our collector are people with the professional experience and expertise and connections and the ability to be bonded in the case of the treasurer, that is consistent with the type of sound fiscal management that this town has pursued and which we have so benefited from.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you to Paul and Peter for doing this, reprising your role in this committee. So appreciate it. Any questions from either of my colleagues?
I have a comment. First of all, Peter and Paul, thank you for your leadership, and thanks to all the members of the Charter Committee for your very significant service, which goes to the heart of the governance of our town. Peter, you had asked me about this issue when I was interviewed by the committee, and I gave you my opinion, which is consistent with your recommendation. I think it's important to point out that unlike many of our other elected positions in town, these 2 positions require a very specific professional skill set. And I am of the opinion that going forward, it would be irresponsible to leave that to chance, to risk that, we just might happen to have someone run who has that skill set. And I think we need to be conservative with respect to this position and the management of our residents' tax dollars. So I am fully in support of your recommendation, and I appreciate all the work that's been done. Thank you.
And I just want to weigh in as well. I just need to let you know, I mean, as I step off from the Mass Municipal Association Select Board President, we're facing this issue everywhere, not just in Westwood, but all towns, that good qualified individuals do not want to run for office. They're happy to hold a position, but they don't necessarily want to run for office. And statewide, we're seeing a decrease in people that are interested in municipal finance, especially, so much so that we're now working on a program with community schools to help get more people re-involved in municipal government, for the future. In fact, probably more likely to be older individuals who are looking to, if you will, reset their career. So I think that there's no doubt about it. This is a great time to act on this, especially after COVID, where a lot of people good qualified individuals are suddenly retired and there's nobody there to step in and take their place. And so we have to look for most qualified as opposed to just someone who happens to live in town. That becomes the hardest issue that will face us going forward. So I am clearly in favor of these two changes.
Okay. With that,
Can I just add one comment, and
certainly
not to belabor the point, it's terrific to hear the support coming from you. But the terminology that makes it easy to kind of the elevator pitch is the encouragement given to us to have operational roles be appointed and advisory roles be elected. And these are two huge operational duties, and that's really the overarching guidance. So to the extent that people have takeaways from this conversation, I think that's kind of the terminology that one should consider.
Yeah, I thought that I actually was, I think I came before you the night that DLS made sort of that definitional distinction. And I thought that was a very, very helpful distinction to make. And so I also am very supportive of this. So if there are no further questions.
I did have one question, Rob. So because the tax collector will be elected this year in 2023, will that person serve out their term and then we would appoint a new one? Is that how it would work?
No, it'll have to be done with the paperwork. We'll have to define when and if that person would be relieved of duties, if you will. Okay. And that's something we're going to have to think about quite specifically, because it's going to require a home rule petition, and home rule petitions sometimes don't get done till the end of terms. So we need someone there for the interim, and then when it passes and is made law, then that person would, maybe we appoint them to finish. Who knows, so, but no, there would be a definite stop in when that position goes away.
Okay.
And Michael, Dottie is part of our group, and I'll start, Dottie, but if you want to add anything, we will inform any candidates who run for candidates who run for tax collector of this effort going through the process to town meeting, if indeed you put it on the warrant. So if they put papers in January, they'll know.
In fact, Dottie, you had communications today with the elections division on how to handle this.
Yeah, I haven't heard back from them yet, but
it's a work in progress.
It is. And when the information is put out there and people do pull their papers, there will be the information for the candidate.
Okay, thank you.
Very clear.
Thank you. Okay. Nothing else. I will move that the select board to include in the 2023 town meeting warrant articles to change the elected office of town treasurer and the elected office of tax collector to appointed positions.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. And once again, we look forward to the other recommendations that the Charter Review Committee will eventually bring before us. And we thank you all for all the hard work. I know you put a lot of, it's an outstanding team, and I know you're putting a lot of thought into this. So thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, moving on. We now have a financial update from Stephanie McManus and Chris Coleman. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie.
Great. I am going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see that.
Yes.
Also,
Okay. So I just have an overall 24 FY24 budget preview. And I'm just going to start off quickly with a review of recent financial highlights. We had gone through this in the previous presentation. At a board meeting earlier this fall, there was a review of the FY22 year-end close, as well as other financial items, current debt, OPEB liability status, free cash certification, which happened in the fall, and review of meals and hotel tax revenue. And then we also, on November 21st, had the tax classification hearing, and there was an approved tax shift, commercial residential, and there was a review of the residential bill, and that was completed. And then we also had the FY22 audit was completed recently, and the tax bills are currently being printed, and those will go out on time. So that's just sort of a review of what's been happening the last few months in the financial world. And then upcoming, we are going to have continued overview of the budget updates. We'll have continued review of the FY24 revenue and expense projections as we move forward in the next few meetings, as well as a review of capital budget requests, a review of municipal operating budgets from the different departments, and a review and presentation of the FY24 proposed budget, which is scheduled to be complete on our side by February 1st. And just a review, we've gone over this previously, but just a review of the FY24 overall budget goals, which is sort of what our goals are every year for the budget. Maintain a high quality of town and school services, maintain moderate growth and sustainable operating budgets. We always want to have a continued high level of capital investment that's important for the town. Want to maintain infrastructure and always have our capital equipment up. It's especially important for our police, fire, DPW. And this year we're projecting the base capital for municipal and schools to be level funded at 2.3 million. And we're just going to have our continued efforts for additional funding beyond the base for important projects, capital funding. We will also have continued compliance with reserve and long-term liabilities. We continue to put towards our OPEB liability each year, as well as a transfer to the stabilization fund. Continued review of fixed cost estimates, which we'll all go into in a later slide. Our discussions to incorporate future large capital items. We always want to keep in mind balancing the tax bill impact, which the next few slides will go into. And then also we'll just develop an overall comprehensive budget plan. And I do want to note with the current economic environment, we're going to have a pretty challenging budget year ahead of us for FY24. Okay, so just to review, I know we've seen the slide before. It's just sort of a background on what funds the budget as far as revenue, right? So it's made up of a few different pieces, but as you can see, a large percentage of that is tax revenue, which is typical of a suburban community. It's a challenging financial model. I know we say that a lot, mainly because of Proposition 2.5. It's the main revenue source is restricted by that requirement. So as I said before, we just try to balance the tax bill impact, keeping that in mind. And this is just a chart of the FY23 budget revenue, which was 113.6 million. So it's just a reminder of where we are in the current year as far as revenue and how it's funding. Okay, the tax levy chart. I'm going to go through this. I know I had gone through this in detail at an earlier presentation with Select Board. I'm going to go through it maybe a little bit on a higher level and just point out certain things that I want to update this time. So as you can see, FY20 to 23, I'll point out, these years are what I would say is completed. So these numbers on here are actuals, whereas right now we're trying to build the FY24 budget, right? So how we start to do that is with the prior year's levy limit, which is circled right here, the 90 million. We start off and with the current year, with the prior year's levy limit, we start off in the current year building the budget. We then add the 2.5, which is what I was referring to with the proposition 2.5. It's 2.5% increase. And then we add new growth. So this year, I just want to highlight, we're breaking it out for the budgeted portion of this. As we have in the past, we do the estimated new growth, which is always a conservative estimate. And then we break it out for the estimated new growth for specific to University Station. And then this year, we are also including a one-time, what we're calling a one-time new growth increase due to the TIF. And what that is Citizens Bank came online recently, and the TIF agreement that we are currently in from FY23 to FY24 is what we're calling a transition year. It is going from a 75% exemption to a 25% exemption. So we feel confident that we can capture the anticipated increase in tax revenue from that project. So that's why we're including an additional 180 in estimated new growth revenue specific to that. So that then brings us to the tax levy limit. And then within that, we can add exempt debt, which brings us to the number of what we call the levy capacity, what we could tax. And
Now,
so
Stephanie, just real quick,
yes.
you note the big jump from fiscal year 23 on the exempt debt to fiscal year 24.
Yes.
Fiscal year 23 is the end of the high school, and fiscal year 24 is year one of the Hamlin Deerfield, which was just approved.
Correct. And I know we say typically debt declines year to year, especially with the high school bond ending in 23, it would have been a decline. But as you said, FY24 is the first year we're capturing that new bond payment, the debt for the Hamlin Deerfield project.
Okay.
All right. So just going back to, I want to point out, as you can see, this new growth estimate number for 23, that was just certified this fall. So when we're building budgets, we're sort of estimating this new growth number, and we do that conservatively. And then once it is certified, it's then incorporated into the tax levy limit. And when I say that, I mean down here, right? This excess limit that we would say that we do not, between the difference of the levy capacity and what we actually tax, this excess then gets built into the base number when we are building the FY24 budget. I just want to call that it's not lost. Oh, sorry.
So as memory serves, when we were at this point last year, that 795, I believe, was 160. Does that sound right, Chris?
Yes, that one of your earlier presentations, that was prior to the certification, the tax certification, that was 160. And I think that's important to know, Mr. Chair, because there are some people who feel that we have a greater capacity when you look at fiscal year 22. If we had budgeted for that expectation, we would have been short. And so the town's historic, conservative, and sustainable budget approach has proven very well, both from a budgeting standpoint and from a credit rating standpoint for the community.
Right. And so just to be abundantly clear, what is shown in that 795, 576 is the difference between the conservative new growth estimate that we had at this point last year and what the actual certified new growth revenue was, correct?
That's correct.
So we do capture that then in the 90 million that starts us off for this year.
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
And that's important to point out because at this point in the budget process for 24, we estimate this conservatively. And as Chris was just saying, because if we just estimated a previous year's, right, we could be off, which would cause issues for the current budget.
Right.
And this is important overall because a large portion of the town revenue is taxes, as we had just said. And this chart is sort of a guide for what we can afford year over year for a budget increase.
And even though you're showing 3 lines in the different sort of new growth area, last year, I believe total we bet 550. So
Right.
that's a typical conservative number for us. But because of the change in the TIF with Citizens, this is including this 180 is not a change in our conservative approach because there's a great deal of certainty to that number.
That's correct. Yes. We have an agreement in place and we already know what the numbers will be. And we have a good estimate that we can anticipate that being an increase. Yes.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just, one of the things that when Stephanie was preparing this, she didn't want to increase the 450 by the 180 amount and then next year have that number go down. So the reason why it's shown as a standalone with the asterisk is because it's only for that transition year. So next year, when she does this projection, you're not going to see that 180. It will be built in, but you're not going to see that line item. And we'll still have our conservative numbers that we use as we move forward.
Very good.
And specifically, the transition year Chris is referencing is, like I said, it went from the 75 exemption to the 25%, and then that will remain the same for the next 10 years of the agreement. So this is sort of the big year that we'll see the difference.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on this slide? We'll move on. Okay, so this is just a preliminary look at the revenue now, switching to FY24. And as we just talked about the tax levy, so the total FY24 levy available is the 2.5%, which is about 2.2 million. Estimated new growth, which we had just said was about 730,000, which includes the TIF. And then the 795 available from the prior year if the levy had been taxed to the full capacity. State aid, we are going to project, initial projection for 24. We won't anticipate receiving those final numbers until hopefully the end of January, although it may be delayed with the new administration. But for now, as we build the FY24 revenue projections, we are level funding that. Local receipts, we have traditionally project that level funding. We're going to continue that for FY24. Free cash was certified at the 7.7 million, and it should be used conservatively. So we want to make sure to continue with current allocations for the financial policies that we have in place. We utilized 2.3 million of that for the base capital, and an additional 125,000 is put specifically towards the stabilization fund from free cash. We also utilize it. Sorry,
go ahead, Stephanie. I'm sorry.
We also utilize free cash for additional capital beyond the base for other articles that we use for capital. We maintain an unallocated balance for the policy of 3.7 million. In previous years that had been 3.5, it's now been increased to 3.7 million per the financial policies. And then another source of revenue is meals and hotel tax. In our meals and hotel fund, the current balance is 1.475 million. And just to look back at last year in the May 2022 town meeting, which would have been the FY23 budget, 650,000 of that was used for capital projects.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think it's important for the board and for others to understand that when we're talking about the free cash, which is a bad term, but that's what the Commonwealth of Massachusetts uses, and we're talking about meals and hotel tax or meals and hotel tax funding, those funds are used for one-time expenses, one-time costs. And I just want to go back, and I know that some people have some pandemic cloud, but I think one of the things that we realize is with the sound financial planning that the town has had and continues to operate with, when those one-time funds go down, if we were using those for reoccurring expenses, we would have had a problem during the pandemic. And we would have had a problem, Westwood would have had a problem during the economic downturn years earlier. So the sound financial planning that the town has imposed and continues to work with through the board, through the FinCom, through town meeting, with the school committee, has allowed us to have a AAA bond rating and really reap some of those benefits. But again, when other communities are having some stronger financial challenges when economic downturns hits, Westwood has been able to plan accordingly and be able to have sustainable operating and capital budgets.
Yep. I mean, that certainly was the case with COVID, because we saw how much the hotel and meals tax took a dip. Just one point of clarification, Stephanie, up at the third bullet under the FY24 levy available, that's that third bullet, 795 available from prior year if full levy. We actually don't realize all of that, right? That the delta between the estimated new growth when it was 550 and whatever it ended up being $1,000,001. So there was 160 probably short of that 195. I think you have to take the 160 still out of that, because we actually didn't tax to that levy. So that was what was the unused levy. So I think that this number is probably more like 635.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, you are correct when it comes to that. It's just, this number is tying back to that, the levy sheet that Stephanie presented earlier. So this
Right. I
is-
just didn't want people thinking we captured all of that 795 because we never actually taxed
You are
the
correct.
160.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification.
All right. And just going into detail on the different pieces of that revenue. State aid, it's been consistent, especially over the past few years. It has become actually more consistent. Historically, it's approximately about 6% of our total revenue budget. And there's been no mid-year cuts or disruptions for 7 years, even several years, even with COVID. So we are anticipating that to be the case for FY24 as well. And as I said before, I'm just going to keep my eye on this because with the new administration, the state aid number, the budget number may be delayed for FY24 by a couple of weeks. Local receipts, the total collection for FY22 was 5.8 million. The year before that, as you can see in the chart, was 5.6 million. It's been pretty steady over the years. It did take a little bit of a dip with COVID, but it's been overall consistent collections. We do use conservative budgeting, which provides for a cushion for economic downturn as such with COVID. And just to point out, the local receipt categories include motor vehicle excise tax, permits, fees and licensing, and investment income. And motor vehicle excise is definitely by far our largest category with $3.4 million in collections, which was a slight decrease from 3.6 in the previous year. But overall, even though we had seen that decrease overall, we were over estimates for local receipts that year. Free cash, strong position. The DOR certified free cash, that's, as you can see, 7.7 million, which was in line with prior years. We use, as Chris was saying, a disciplined use of free cash for the balances. It's not applied to operating budgets. In line with our financial policies, it's available for use for capital needs. So like I said, we do not fund our operating budget. It's one-time capital needs. And we had two good FY22 budget to actual results with a strong management even through the COVID impact. So just as a reminder, our current FY23 balance budget was funded with about $3.8 million of free cash. And you can see there just the different projects. It was the base school municipal capital, the stabilization fund appropriation, and then as well as the additional town meeting articles, snow and ice, aid to the elderly, 300,000, which was a one-time, and then also the American Legion property that was bought recently for the 700,000. So just examples of how we've used free cash in the past and how we will continue to use it moving forward along the lines with our financial policies. And as it says on the bottom, the target is approximately 3.7 million unallocated. And we plan to use the conservative usage of free cash moving forward as we go through the 24 budget cycle. So FY22 meals and hotel tax. Just as a background, at the November 2017 town meeting, residents approved establishing a special purpose fund to hold all of the meals and hotel tax revenue until it is appropriated by future town meetings. So it's not for general fund revenue. Funds have been used by the town for capital projects. Like I said, one-time capital projects, not operating budgets. And here's just a quick history for the FY23 budget, what was appropriated at town meeting in May of 2022, which was $650,000. And these are the projects listed that funding went towards. And these two charts just show sort of the history of the annual meals and the annual hotel tax revenue. And as you can see for FY23, we've just to point out that is just one quarterly payment so far. The balance in the account as of November 30th is 1.475 million, but we expect another quarter to be received at the end of December, beginning of January. And just a breakdown of the most recent quarterly receipts. And like I said, the balance as of November 30th is the 1.475. And moving on from the revenue side to the expense side. So the FY24 preliminary look at expenditures. By far the largest area expenditures is school and municipal operating budgets. And then these are just the components that make up that total operating budget, which includes school and municipal operating, fixed cost, state charges, others. capital, debt, and sewer. And 80% of that operating budget is staffing, which provides for core services to the community. And we always strive for sustainable budgets and for our operating budgets to be sustainable for school and municipal. All right, so this is just a pie chart of the current FY23 budgeted expenditure. So it's a summary of the 113.6 million and how it's broken out. As you can see, 66% of that is the operating budget for schools and municipal. And then we also just wanted to point out a breakdown to show the impact of each, even just 1% increase for school and municipal budgets, which is approximately, and that's a 1% increase over the FY23. That number is approximately $746,000 per 1% increase. And that's just broken out, as you can see, between the school and municipal. And then we went on to see what would that mean for a 2.5% increase? What would that mean for a 3, for a 4, for a 5? So as you can see, each 1% is really a significant impact on the overall budget. And this is just a history of past budget increases over time, starting in FY16 through FY23. And as you can see, it's been pretty level, both with the school has been around 3.5%, and as well as the town 3.5, 3.6%, with the exception of FY16 and 17, as you can see, which is pointed out right here. And that was the year that there was significant new growth increase, because at the time that was when the University Station was coming online. And a lot of that revenue from that growth went to fund the increase of the direct services, right? So the new growth was included in the operating budget, and then also as included in the base going forward. So it continues to pay for things in the out year. So even though it was a one-time increase, it stayed with it moving forward for the base for future years. But when there's no longer significant new growth from University Station, it means that there's no longer significant increases in these out years. So that's why we've seen this sort of 3.5% increase from FY18 until now. So let's look at fixed costs. So fixed costs. I'm sorry?
Nope, go ahead.
Question? All right. That includes employee benefit costs, shared costs, trash, reserve accounts, and they are approximately 19% of the operating budget. So this is just a look back at FY23 and how those fixed costs are split up between school and municipal. And then fixed cost projected increases in FY24. So these are all estimated increase to the total fixed cost budget, which is about an overall increase we're estimating right now of approximately 8%, which is a $1.6 million increase over the FY23 budget. Right now, for the pension assessment, we are estimating an increase of 10%. And that did come from, we had contact with the Norfolk County, we have our contact there, suggested that number, but we still have not received the final FY24 assessment. So right now that is an estimate, but it is coming from Norfolk County as what we should conservatively estimate. And just previous year's actual increases, just to point that out, have been around 7%, and FY22 is down to about 6%. So just as a history on that. Health insurance, we're estimating an increase of 8%. And that was a number given to us by the town's consultant for insurance. So the GIC updates their information in February and March. So we'll have a better estimate of that come March after their meeting. And the previous year's actual increases have been they were 5%, and then in FY23, as you can see, it was 7%. And currently for trash, our estimated increase is 8.5%. We do have a current contract in place, but it includes variable costs. So because of those variable costs, we are estimating an increase of 8.5%. And then just other fixed cost increases on the smaller side, it only makes up $168,000, but overall for comprehensive insurance, we're estimating 5%. We're estimating level funding for Medicare, and then the payroll tax increase of 10%. And then we are also, as we traditionally have done, increasing our Obed appropriation by the $25,000. And then other shared costs, which is increases in town and school energy and sustainability and communications, we have as $233,000 increase for FY24. So just the capital budget, this, I'm going to go over this in a high level overview. We're going to be talking more about the capital budget in the January 9th meeting. But just overall, it's important to maintain the town and school assets, meaning buildings, infrastructures, equipment. And this is an example of the base capital for school and municipal. And we are targeting, or we are projecting a level funding of 2.3 for FY24. And that our target policy is approximately 2.6 million. We've, as you can see over the years, in past years, it was not funded close to that target, but we are getting better now and increasing ongoing capital budgets for now. So additional capital articles beyond the base. Since FY17, the town meeting has approved an additional capital budget article, and our effort is to fund capital that has been deferred by years or larger items that do not easily fit within the base capital budget articles. And here's just the last 3 years examples of what those additional capital articles have been. And then also just a breakdown of the amount of funding that has been allocated for those additional capital articles. And we address important capital needs, and those are usually funded through available funding such as free cash and meals and hotel taxes. And so that was just an overview of the FY24, where we are with projecting out revenue and expenditures. So the next steps in the budget cycle will just be continuing in January, February to have meetings and update the board on FY24 revenue projections, including local revenue sources and the FY24 state budget. And we will continue to review capital budget articles. As I said, we'll have more of an update on the January 9th meeting for that. Ongoing capital, timing of larger projects being considered. We'll also continue to review the FY24 municipal budget requests coming in from the departments, the base budgets, and then any requested new positions and programs. And then, like I said, the FY24 state aid, the governor's budget typically comes at the end of January. However, with the new administration, it may be delayed. So we will continue to look at that and update that number as we get more information. The select board proposed budget document, like I said, we are have a date in mind of February 1st for that. That'll include the municipal budget document, the overall budget summary, and initial capital articles. And then we'll present the proposed FY24 budget to FinCom on February 14th.
Thank you, Stephanie, for the update. I want to be clear on a few things, though we're still very early in the budget development process. One thing is abundantly clear from what you've already presented, and you alluded to that we have some real challenges ahead. You mentioned that we're bound by Prop 2.5, which limits our levy growth to 2.5 plus new growth. And over the last 10 years, that's probably what's landed somewhere in the vicinity of 3.5 to 4.5% in total levy growth based on some of that new growth at University Station. And we've certainly benefited from that. As that new growth is subsiding, as the project is built out, it's making for mounting operating budget pressures.
Yes.
And this year seems to be evidence of that, because given that the schools, and they account for roughly 46% of the town budget, are projecting a need of 5.65% based on what I heard at their last meeting to maintain level services, and the shared costs, which you just showed, which account for what, 18%, 19% of the town budget, that you're forecasting an 8% growth. That's some really challenging math. And I know, we're going to work hard over the next several months with the school administration and the school committee to be as collaborative and creative as possible. But I want to be clear, this is going to likely require some hard decisions to be made over those next 2 months. So thank you for the update. Are there questions from either of my colleagues with anything that Stephanie has presented?
I'm good, Rob. I've been through it
No
enough.
questions. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have a presentation of a hazard mitigation plan. And we have a number of folks attending to present to us the hazard mitigation plan that came out of the Hazard Mitigation Steering Committee. So with that, I don't know who's going to take the lead. Is that Nora? Are you going to take the lead on this?
Sure. So I will get us started and then I will turn it over to Emily Farmer from Beta. This is a project we've been working on for several months now. Beta is the consultant on this project. Emily Farmer and Emily Slotnick have been principally writing the new hazard mitigation plan. This will update a plan that was last adopted in 2011. And when that plan was adopted, it was done as an in-house process. I think it was chiefly by the fire chief and the public works director. And this year we've had a more inclusive process that has involved staff members from various organizations throughout the various departments throughout the town. And we also had a public workshop. We've had Emily introduce this to the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and now she's here to give you an update on where we stand. So let me turn it over to Emily. She has a brief presentation to share with you.
Sure, I'll just share my screen. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Emily Farmer. I'll be representing Beta today. Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members, for having us here today. We really appreciate it. I'll see if Emily Slotnick shows up. I just texted her. So we shall see if that happens. But if not, I've shortened down this presentation for you folks who may have seen it previously in our couple of other presentations to the Conservation Commission and to the Planning Board. But in short, we have updated your hazard mitigation plan for the 2022 year. A quick list of those folks who were on the planning committee with us. Of course, Nora was sort of a key member of spearheading this committee. So thank you so much, Nora, for your just sort of constant support throughout this entire process. We really appreciate it. So a quick list of those people there. And, you know, for those of you folks who have read the hazard mitigation plan, you may already know this information, but it's always good to review. What is hazard mitigation? It's any sustained action taken to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to people and to property due to natural hazards, specifically natural hazards. And so, you know, we're looking to create solutions to lessen risk of damage from natural hazards over time. And it's very important for each community because of the possibility to get any mitigation grant that you apply for. So hazard mitigation plans are so important to communities, especially in Massachusetts. If anybody is applying to any climate or hazard related grants, we also try to focus pretty specifically on climate change in this plan as well. So that broadens the scope of any of the grants you might apply for to include those that will incorporate climate change in them, like updating the floodplain overlay district, things that Westwood is already doing. Again, those of you who read the plan will know this process a little bit, but there are a few components to a hazard mitigation plan that we went through to get to this finished product that we have now. The first of which is the risk assessment. We identified natural hazards, we assessed the vulnerabilities within Westwood, but also assessed the strengths, the capabilities within Westwood, and then did an inventory of all the critical facilities within the town, which I'll show you a map of in 1 second. The hazards of concern we identified, we then grouped by climate change, their primary climate change interaction, because we believe that climate change really is the foremost threat to towns in Massachusetts and across the United States. So many hazard mitigation plans have been grouping each of the hazards they have by climate change interaction. These are the hazards that we identified with the committee for Westwood. And this is a map as zoomed in as it can be of the critical facilities that we identified. Places like municipal buildings, water treatment plants, pump stations, dams, transportation facilities, and that's overlaid over the FEMA floodplain districts, so interacting directly with one of the hazards. So you can see that there are some areas of importance within the town that directly interact with floodplains that we want to pay attention to. We moved on from our risk assessment after reviewing those risks within the town and the strengths that the town had, the plans, the processes, the committees at the town's disposal, to establishing the goals, which were slightly updated from the 2011 goals, but the goals were mainly the same. We want to protect the town in the face of natural hazards, protect populations, and integrate those processes into town processes. So these are all shortened versions of what's in the plan. And from those goals and from all of the information that we gathered, we developed
the mitigation strategies. So we came up with a total of 18 mitigation actions, 10 of which are carried forward from other plans that the town already has in its repertoire or from the original 2011 plan. And you can see off to the side here, we've grouped them off by action type. A lot of these are planning and prevention actions, which means they're related to those processes of planning and prevention of damage from natural resources. And so we also identified the benefits that each action has. The town leads, so who will be taking charge on each of the actions, and any of the partners or sort of sub-consultants that might be asked to assist in implementing the actions that we've developed.
Emily,
we want these.
Before you move on
Go
from
for
this
it.
slide, just one
Yes.
question. I see that you have 0 under structural projects, but you have 13 under planning and prevention. Do you have a sense of, and I don't recall the number of them, but I did see some that were in the much more detailed report, that there would need to be some sort of buttressing, if you will, of existing structures. So how many of those 13 sort of fall into that category?
That's a really great question that I don't know off the top of my head. But if we take a look at the actions here, I've listed them by high priority and low priority. What I'm guessing is those which involve structural changes are sort of grouped into that planning process because we haven't necessarily identified, a specific dam that needs any assistance. We've sort of made sure that any culverts are consistently clean sort of things, but we haven't identified one culvert or another that might need assistance. And that's why they're not technically grouped under that structural category. What I do know that we have is we do mention Conant Road directly as an area of repeat flooding. And so that was an area that we really wanted to address within the mitigation actions. And I think that's the one, number 9, continue to broaden public education around stormwater and broaden awareness, build community support, municipal investment in stormwater infrastructure. And I believe one of our medium priority actions is also relating directly to that Conant Road area. I gotta look through each of these. So yeah, the floodplain management regulations, number 10 there, number 16 as well. To focus on those areas that Westwood might apply for grants for to directly address. So I guess if we wanted to be super technical about it, we could put a few of these under multiple categories. But I think it's just easier at the time to put them all under that planning and practice. I can go back to that previous slide as well.
No, that's all right. And part of the reason that I ask is that those types of things generally come with price tags, and so that we will need to be factoring some of those into capital planning, I would imagine, if there are things that we need to prioritize from an investment standpoint. And given that this report is just being issued, I know that's not part of current capital, is it? Unless Todd is already planning some of those things, Chris.
Mr. Chair, you're right. It's not part of the current capital. However, I wouldn't be surprised if Todd is already planning.
Does sound like him. From all I know, that does sound like him, which is a good thing. It's great. I think Westwood is sort of one of the towns that has the most active DPW that I've seen in these plans, which is really exciting for the town. And yeah, I think the other thing that we want to consider when we're considering funding, we do talk about that a little bit in the actual plan, allocating some of the funding that might be necessary for these projects. But actually more important than we think they are those goals. And what can we capture within those goals that can get us funding, even if there isn't a specific price tag related to these goals, what can they relate to in the plan, within the town, in other plans, in the comprehensive plan, in your zoning bylaws, things of that sort, that can help in achieving, getting more of those grants. I do want to mention, you might have noticed if you were counting, there aren't actually 18 listed here. It's because we have 2 low priority. They're still very important to the town, but we rank them as low priority. One is number 17, which is coordinate with Eversource to protect power lines and infrastructure and reduce incidences of power outages during storm events. And number 2, which I think is actually maybe one of the most important, is institutionalize hazard mitigation planning practices into ongoing town operations. So that's really ensuring that these actions and that these goals are carried out within the town. We did a lot of outreach and coordination for this plan, which you might have actually participated in. We sent out a survey, held our committee meetings with our Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee, as well as a public meeting, presentations to the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and you folks here today. And FEMA itself really values outreach and public coordination. In fact, they require it in the plan. So we made sure that that was densely in there. And after we spoke with members of the public, we incorporated their suggestions and comments into the plan. Discussions with the planning board had us value drought tolerant design practices more. Our emergency communication system that we had listed has been updated since that time. So these were just some of the implementations that we made because of that public comment, which we thought was really important to mention. And you can see that Conan Road and Country Lane, we really wanted to specifically mention that area. And so our process and our next steps. We're looking a little bit into the past here, but our presentation with you is in December. Hard to believe it's already December. We've already submitted it to MEMA and FEMA for their review. We're hopefully anticipating MEMA and FEMA conditional approval within the year, if not early on next year. Oftentimes MEMA will send us back a few comments to make just so that they ensure that we can get this passed by FEMA. They're usually super helpful comments that we want to incorporate into the plan. And we're hoping for an adoption resolution from the folks here on the select board as well. Any questions?
I have a comment and a couple of questions. First of all, thank you, Emily, for that presentation, and Nora. That was very helpful. I read the plan. I'm very impressed by the work that's gone into this, and I really want to thank everybody who contributed to it. I was really happy to see that one of the priorities is the development of a climate action plan, which is a high priority in our comprehensive plan. We've talked about that here before, and I understand that once we have our town planner on board, that we'll be working on that. So working not just on the adaptive responses, but the actual climate mitigation policies. So excited to see that there. Yes, number 12.
Yes.
And just a couple of quick questions, if I may. In the plan, the MVP program is referenced, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Planning Program. Can you just talk briefly about the interplay between the Hazard Mitigation Plan and the MVP program?
Sure, it's a mouthful. I just continually say MVP whenever, because I can't say Municipal Vulnerability Planning Process that often. It was super helpful that Beta actually worked on the MVP with Westwood. And so a lot of the information that we gathered from that plan was pretty essential in getting an understanding of where the town already sits in the actions that it wants to complete and in the capabilities that are already at the disposal of the town. So the MVP itself is a huge capability. The fact that Westwood is already a climate conscious community and has made plans to hopefully create different actions, but some of those actions were carried over. I couldn't tell you which ones specifically were carried over from that plan at this point, but we did carry over a few of those actions that were deemed super important, mostly related to stormwater from that plan. And so that was sort of a big stepping stone for us to get to this plan. And it was nice to have the folks who worked on that plan in my office and in the offices within the town as well. So we could get a sense of, where the actions were from when those MVP actions were created.
That's great. Thank you. And my next question is, the plan talks about an annual review of mitigation and resilience progress. And maybe this is more a question for Nora. Are we thinking that would happen, say, at the end of 23? What kind of timetable do we think we'll be on with respect to reviewing our actions on this plan, assuming it is all approved?
I would say at best the end of of 23 is the latest we would push it out. It may even be sooner than that. So I think we'll work with Todd Fortune to see what time frame works best for Public Works and when is the best time to do that assessment year after year. But we will pick a time, be the same time consistently. I don't know if that'll be spring, fall, or winter, but it'll be consistent year after year.
That's great, Nora. Thank you. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I noticed the last plan was in 2011, so a lot has changed in 2011. Our committee is made up of great members throughout the town. So I think it's a great mitigation package, and so I'm very in favor of it. Thank everyone who volunteered their time to sit on this committee and make our town better as we move forward.
Before you make that motion, Mike, I just want to sort of reinforce some of the findings that you guys highlighted in that report that go to some of the points that Mary Ann made. The frequency of what are historically 100-year storms are moving, towards the end of the century into the every 25 to 50 years. So they're going to be far more frequent. And all you need to do is think back to the water rushing down the street in Norwood past Lewis's and into the Norwood Hospital there to understand what the impact of that might be if we don't properly plan and maintain our infrastructure, especially around stormwater management.
Yeah, very true. Something we really want to focus on this plan. I'll just sort of end by saying another thank you to Nora, to Danielle, and to John, who are also on our committee. Couldn't see anybody while I was presenting, so I'm happy to see your faces.
All right, so I move the select board approve and adopt the town of Westwood Hazard Mitigation Plan 2022 update in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, and as recommended by the town's Hazard Mitigation Steering Committee, and to authorize the clerk to sign the certificate of adoption.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just one
Yes,
thing.
is my audio going out a little bit?
Yeah. I just want to again thank the working group for the work that they've done, and I know member LeBlanc Cummings talked about the town planner. We have been looking. We've done multiple searches. I just want to say, and it's probably something I should say every time she presents to the select board, but Nora has been serving in multiple capacities, wearing multiple hats. Town planner is one of them. So although I don't want anyone to think that the work is being piled up and left on someone's desk, well, it is. It's on Nora's desk, and she's been doing a fabulous job. And I just want the board to know, everyone else who's listening to know, and for Nora, thank you for all of your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well said, Chris, and totally agree. Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora.
Okay, so
Nora's not going away yet.
that concludes the actions, and now we're going to move on to some new business. We have a property owner authorization forms that with 2 planning board applications related to Obed Baker House and the project there. So I will turn it back over to Nora to tell us a little bit about this project, where we stand, and what you're looking for from us tonight.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm sure most of you remember the Obed Baker House is a town-owned property that we put out to bid with a request for proposals. It was just over a year ago that we received a proposal from Todd C. Sullivan Construction, and the board last January, I believe, declared that declared Todd the designated developer, so awarded him the Obed Baker House. Before actually transferring the property to him, though, we had a couple of steps to go through. The first step was going to town meeting and getting authorization for the disposition of the property, as well as a zoning change. The property was split between local business A and single residence C. The town meeting in May rezoned it so that it's all single residence C, and also has a flexible multiple use overlay district covering it, which allows for mixed use development. So Todd's proposal involves renovating and putting an addition on the back of the historic Obed Baker House, as well as constructing a veterinary building on the property right next door to that. And the existing cemetery barn that's in the back of that, the site where that barn is, will be used for parking for the veterinary building. Todd will build a new cemetery building, a new and improved cemetery building on the cemetery parcel, the town-owned cemetery parcel that's sort of behind the Dunkin' Donuts Plaza. So there are two separate applications that Todd will be filing with the planning board. The first will be the flexible multiple use overlay district special permit application that will be for the Obed Baker House and the veterinary building. That's a special permit in front of the planning board, and he's prepared to file that application for a January hearing, but needs a property owner authorization. Since the town is still the property owner, that authorization would come from the town administrator if the board approves. And then the second application, which will be filed a little bit later, is for the new cemetery barn. That has to be reviewed by the planning board also as a site plan review, an environmental impact design review approval. And so that's a separate application, requires a separate town property owner authorization form, also to be signed by the town administrator if the select board authorizes. So the timing of this, the first application, Todd would like to get in a matter of days. I believe the deadline is the 21st of December. So he's anxious to get that application started and before the planning board. And then the second application for the cemetery barn will come a little bit later. I understand that Todd is still working with Todd Korchin on the exact design of that building. They're not quite ready to apply. As far as timing of construction, the plan would be for Todd to, once he has all his approvals in hand, to begin work on the Obed Baker House as well as on the veterinary building, not open the veterinary building until the new cemetery barn is built, because the new cemetery barn has to be built first, then the old one knocked down, and then a parking lot built for the veterinary clinic. So it's a kind of a staged process. I believe it will take about 18 months from the date of the start of construction to complete it.
Very good questions from my colleagues.
Oh, I'd like to get it on the tax rolls as soon as possible. So
That's I was just going to say, Michael, that's one of those great examples of something being repurposed and redeveloped for new growth and we've seen in the prior budget slides from Stephanie, just how important that new growth is to sustaining town services. So I would agree with you 100% on that.
all right, so I move that the select board authorize the town administrator, Chris Coleman, to sign a property owner authorization form for a FMUOD application for the Obed Baker House property, and to sign a second property owner authorization form for an EIDR application for the new Westwood Cemetery property.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you, Nora, for helping shepherd this process, and Chris, feel free to sign away.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nora.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's it for new business. We're going to go to some appointments and reappointments, and I believe we have two new appointments to the Commission on Disability, and we have an appointment for the Dedham Westwood Water District Commissioner. So, Chris, would you like to take us through these?
Sure. So yes, so as the board may know, just to refresh the board and refresh the viewers, so when we have vacancies, there are some interviews that take place. I'm included in that along with a representative from that committee or staff liaison. We've done that in both cases here, and we are very pleased to recommend Stephanie Feingold to the Commission on Disabilities. And I'm just trying to make sure I say everything else correctly. And Elizabeth Poland as well. Both have a great interest. It was a great, Raina, who was on earlier, was part of the interview process representing the Commission on Disabilities. We're very excited for these two residents to step up and serve in this capacity and recommend them fully to the board.
Okay, let's take that as our first action. Any
All right, so
questions about either candidate?
No.
No, I will just say that I've attended meetings with Steph and Liz on the COD, and I think they would both be great members.
Excellent.
Agreed. So I move the select board appoint Stephanie Feingold and Elizabeth Poland as members of the Commission on Disability for terms to expire on June 30th, 2025.
I second that.
All right, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. And next, Chris, we have an opening that's going to get filled. I know we have a member who's looking to roll off of the Dedham Westwood Water District, and it sounds like we have a very highly qualified individual to replace them.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So Mark Phillips, who applied to serve as one of the representatives to the Dedham Westwood Water District on behalf of Westwood, Blake Lucas and I, who's the executive director of the Dedham Westwood Water District, had a great conversation with Mr. Phillips, who has great background in water, working with municipalities, capital improvements when it comes to these types of facilities, and will fit in very well with the commission. So Blake and I both unanimously support the recommendation to the select board for Mark to serve in this capacity.
I know Mark well, and I am pleased that he has stepped forward and offering his expertise on behalf of the town. So any questions from either of my colleagues?
Oh, highly qualified. All right, I move to the select board.
Tish,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh. So Tish, just to clarification, if the board supports this recommendation, Mr. Phillips, the earliest he would work in that capacity or serve in that capacity would be the end of, is it December or January?
It's beginning of January.
Beginning of January. Okay. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
So I move the select board appoint Mark Phillips as a Dedham Westwood Water Commissioner, representing Westwood, for a term to begin on January 1st, 2023, and expire on December 31st, 2025.
I second that.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Okay, thank you there. All right, next up, we have approval of minutes. We have the December 5th minutes. Any questions or comments regarding the December 5th minutes?
No.
No. I do not.
Okay, well, should we take a motion?
I move that the select board approve the select board minutes of our December 5th, 2022 meeting as written.
Second.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. That is the end of our agenda for our scheduled activities. Our next meeting is January 9th, 6 p.m. via Zoom. And with that, I want to wish everyone very happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a very, very happy New Year. We hope to see you all out for the fireworks on New Year's Eve. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Marianne? Okay, roll call vote.
Second.
Okay. Marianne,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.